My name is Robert Callahan, and I'm 69 years old, retired foreman, proud veteran, father of one, widower of 6 years. And up until recently, I thought the most painful part of growing old would be the loneliness. I never imagined the most dangerous part will be living with my daughter's husband. It started like most betrayals do, slow, quiet, easy to miss if you aren't looking. I live in a 2-story house in a small town outside of Asheville, North Carolina. My daughter, Emma, moved in last year with her husband, Bryce, and their 2-year-old, Calvin. Said they needed to reset financially. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Because Emma was my world, my only child, the last light I had after my wife, Maureen, passed. Bryce? Well, I didn't like him much even before all this started. Too slick, too proud, always on his phone, always talking down to people who worked with their hands, people like me. But I never said a word, because I'd do anything to stay close to Emma and my grandson, even if it meant biting my tongue till it bled. The first time I noticed something strange was 2 weeks ago. It was early, about 6:30 a.m. I was sitting in my room, like I always do, waiting for the smell of coffee to drift up the stairs from the kitchen. Every morning, without fail, Emma would brew a pot before leaving for work. But that morning, the scent hit me like a brick wall. It was bitter, too bitter, off. I walked downstairs slowly, and there was Bryce pouring 2 mugs. "Oh, hey, Pop," he said, flashing that smile he only used when he wanted something. Emma had to leave early today. I made the coffee. I took the cup he offered, smiled, and thanked him. Then I walked back upstairs, closed the door, and didn't take a sip. Because here's something Bryce didn't know. I don't just drink coffee. I study it. 50 years of brewing it the old-fashioned way. Always grind my own beans. I can taste the difference between dark roast, light roast, and poison. That morning, I smelled antifreeze. Not enough to kill a horse, but enough to get someone sick. Make it look like a bad stomach bug. Easy for a coroner to miss. I poured the mug into the drain under the bathroom sink and ran the hot water until the room steamed up. Then I waited. Bryce came upstairs about 20 minutes later. I pretended to be groggy. Sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples. "Pop, you all right?" I looked up slowly. Coffee tasted strange. Got a little dizzy. He chuckled, just a little too quickly. "Probably just old pipes. Or maybe your system's slowing down. You were pushing 70, you know." He didn't stay long. Just said he had errands. But I heard the shuffle in his step as he left my room. I heard the breath he released in relief. And that's when I knew. He thought I was going to die. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my recliner, lights off, TV flickering quietly in the background. And I thought about every little moment from the past few months. How he started asking about my pension, my will, how he offered to set up my online banking so Emma wouldn't have to worry about things when the time came. How he mentioned, more than once, that this old house would fetch a decent price if someone fixed it up. He wasn't planning for my future. He was erasing it. I made a plan, quietly, carefully, like I used to when I was a foreman in charge of keeping dozens of men alive in dangerous conditions. The first rule, don't confront him. Not yet. Because men like Bryce don't operate on emotion. They operate on power. The minute you show fear, they win. But the minute you pretend you've fallen into their trap, that's when you learn what they're really capable of. The next day, I asked him to help me fix the shed. "It's been a while since I got up on that ladder," I said with a wheezy laugh. He grinned. "You got it, Pop." He didn't know I was recording everything with a small audio recorder I'd hidden inside my jacket pocket. Didn't know I already had someone at the VA lab running a test on the coffee he made. Didn't know I'd started writing a journal, time-stamping everything, and mailing a copy to my old friend from the Army once a week. He didn't know that I was still a soldier, just one fighting a different kind of war. That Sunday, Emma asked if I was feeling better. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Never felt stronger." She smiled and kissed my forehead, and it broke me a little, because I realized she had no idea who she married. And if I wasn't careful, she'd be a widow before she turned 40. That night, it happened again. I was sitting on my bed when Bryce knocked softly. "Hey, Pop brought you something." He entered with a new mug of coffee, this time with sugar. I took it, smiled. "Thanks, son," I said. He smiled back. "Hope it helps you sleep." Then he turned, walked toward the door, and that's when he saw it. The bedroom mirror across from the door was angled just enough to show what was behind him. And in that mirror, he saw me, pouring the coffee slowly into a potted plant. The look on his face, I'll never forget it. Eyes wide, skin pale, like a man who just realized the grave he dug wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting for him. Is something wrong? I asked, still holding the cup upside down. He turned slowly. Try to laugh. You didn't want it? I wanted to see what you'd do. The silence between us stretched like a wire pulled tight. He didn't blink, didn't move, but his hands started to tremble. You know, I said softly, they say when someone tries to poison you once, it's murder. But when he does it twice, that's enough to bury a man forever. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out, and I just looked at him, steady, calm, like a man who had already buried his fear. Here's a special kind of heartbreak that comes when your child chooses someone, and, deep down they chose wrong. But you stay quiet, because if you say something and you're wrong, you risk pushing them away. If you say something and you're right, you might lose them forever. That's how I felt about Bryce from the very first handshake. I still remember the day Emma brought him home. It was a summer afternoon. She pulled up in a silver sedan with all the windows down and her hair in a loose ponytail. She was smiling the way daughters do when they want their fathers to approve something before it's even shown. Bryce stepped out of the passenger side with a clean shirt, flashy watch, and the kind of grin that made my stomach turn. Too perfect, too smooth, too practiced. He walked right up and said, "Mr. Callahan, I've heard so much about you. You've raised one hell of a woman." That should have flattered me, but something about the way he said it, like he was giving a speech he'd rehearsed in the car mirror. Still, I smiled. I shook his hand. I even grilled ribs and asked him about his job. He worked in sales, software or something. Never explained it well. Never had a clear schedule. Always between startups. Emma said he was ambitious. I said nothing, because she loved him. And when your daughter is all you've got left in the world, you let her love who she loves, even if it breaks you. They got married 2 years later. Small ceremony in the city park. Emma wore Maureen's bracelet. I stood beside her and gave a speech about growth and trust and how sometimes love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about choosing to stay through imperfection. I meant every word. I just never thought I'd be the one betrayed in the end. After the wedding, they moved out west for a bit. Said Bryce got a job in tech sales in Nevada. Emma called me once a week. Said she was doing great, but I could hear the tired in her voice, the stress. And when she told me Bryce didn't want kids yet, I started to feel the cracks. Emma always wanted to be a mom. She'd read books on parenting when she was a teenager, saved baby names in a notebook. So when she called me crying 2 years later, saying Bryce had lost his third job and they had to come home, I cleared out the guest room before she even asked. At first, things were quiet. Emma went back to work at the clinic. Bryce stayed home, looking for remote opportunities. That was his excuse. What I saw, him sleeping in till 11, watching stock videos on YouTube, going out to meetings that never resulted in anything but long showers and missed dinners. Then Calvin came along, a bright, chubby-cheeked miracle of a boy. And I'll admit it, for a while, that baby made me forget my suspicions. I'd rock him on the porch and tell him about the war, about his grandma's lemon pie, about Emma's first bike ride. And for a moment, life felt full again. But then Bryce got restless. He started asking questions. First, innocent enough. "Hey, Pop, you got a will, right? You ever think about downsizing? You still got that insurance policy from the plant?" I told myself he was just planning, helping, being cautious. But then I caught him in my study one afternoon, rifling through my old safe box. He said he was looking for stamps. I told him the stamps were in the kitchen drawer. He didn't apologize. He just grinned and said, "Old habits." And that's when I started watching him closely. I made little tests. Moved my insurance paperwork to a new drawer. Locked it. Put a small hair across the gap. It was gone 2 days later. Put a fake envelope marked "Updated Will Emma" on my nightstand. It was opened and carefully taped shut the next morning. He thought I was a sleepy old man. He didn't know that men like me, we survive by learning who to trust. And who's wearing a mask? Then came the coffee. That cup. That smell. And suddenly, everything came into focus. Bryce didn't want me around anymore. I was a blockade, a signature he couldn't forge, a witness he couldn't risk. If he got me out of the way, Emma would be vulnerable, distracted, grieving, and he could sell the house, move the family, control everything. That night, after the coffee incident, I made my real plan. Not for revenge, but for truth. I contacted Ray Morales, my old buddy from the Army Reserves. He works as a private investigator, now out in Raleigh. Told him I needed quiet surveillance. Told him I suspected something dangerous. Within a week, Ray had started digging. What he found, I'll never forget the files he handed me. Pushpin Bryce had maxed out 3 credit cards in Emma's name. Pushpin, he'd taken out a payday loan for $15,000 using forged documents. Pushpin, he had been gambling online under aliases, using my Wi-Fi. Pushpin, and worst of all, 2 years ago, while Emma was still pregnant, he'd been messaging another woman in Arizona, promising her this old man will be gone soon. Once the house is in her name, we're out. Ray looked at me, face grim. You ready to blow this open, Robert? I nodded slowly. Not yet, I said. I need him to make one more move. Because if I knew anything about men like Bryce, it was this. They always go too far. Always get greedy. Always think they're smarter than everyone in the room. What he didn't know, I had already turned that room into a trap. I bought new surveillance cameras. Small, wireless, hidden in smoke detectors and clocks. I had the VA run toxicology on the leftover coffee. Traces of ethylene glycol, just like I thought. Lethal in the wrong dose. I wrote a second will. One that gave Emma everything and locked the house under trustee review until full investigation could be done. I had it notarized, witnessed, and then I told Bryce I'd be updating all my accounts just in case. He smiled wide and said, "Smart move, Pop. You never know what could happen." Oh, I knew. The next morning, he brought me another cup of coffee. Black, steaming, smelled sweet. I took it with a smile, sipped once, then dropped the mug to the floor like I was having a seizure. He froze. I gasped, clawed at the air, and fell off the bed. I could hear him run out of the room, rushing to grab his phone. I stayed still, eyes closed, heart racing. Then I heard the click, the unmistakable click of the safe opening in my study. He wasn't calling 911. He was going for my documents, my deeds, my will, my life. That's when I stood up quietly and walked to the hallway. And what he saw next, he'll never forget it, because when he turned around, I was standing there, alive, holding a camera, recording everything. Bryce stood frozen in the doorway, like a child caught stealing cookies. Only this cookie was a man's life. My voice was calm when I spoke. That's quite the reaction for someone who thought I was dying. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I raised the small hidden camera in my hand. Its red light blinked. Quiet. Steady. I've got it all. Every word. Every lie. Every move. Still, he said nothing. His eyes darted, looking for an escape route. But there wasn't one. Not this time. You thought I'd go down quietly. Thought I was just some old fool. I said, stepping closer. But I've been watching you longer than you've been plotting. His lips moved. I didn't. Don't. I snapped. Don't you insult what little intelligence you think I have. You tried to kill me, Bryce. He shook his head rapidly, like a kid trying to erase a nightmare. No, that's not what happened, he stammered. Then why did you go straight for my files instead of dialing 911? He blinked. I blinked back. We stood there, still as stone. I gave him one last warning. You walk out of this room, you walk straight into a choice. You can come clean to Emma and take your punishment like a man, or I go to the police and press charges. Attempted murder, fraud, identity theft. Pick your poison. His face went pale. He turned and bolted down the stairs like a dog in a storm. But what he didn't know, Emma was already home, and she had heard everything. I'd asked Ray to invite her to lunch that day and delay her return. But Emma had gotten suspicious. She came home early, heard it all from the top of the stairs. I didn't plan it that way, but I thank God it happened, because when Bryce stormed downstairs, flustered and sweaty, he looked up and saw her, standing like a ghost in the foyer. Emma, he choked. She said nothing, just stared at him, and then looked at me. The betrayal in her eyes cracked something inside me. Not at me, but at the whole situation, like her world had collapsed in slow motion. Emma looked down at the coffee mug still in my hand, then back at Bryce. And for the first time in our lives, I saw a fire in her that could melt steel. "Did you poison my father?" she asked, voice trembling but sharp. He took a step toward her. "Baby, no, I didn't. He's setting me up." "I heard everything, Bryce," she snapped. "You tried to kill him." He reached for her hand. She recoiled like he was diseased. "Emma, I panicked. I wasn't going to actually." She turned away, slowly. Then she said, "Get out. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care. You leave now, or I call the cops myself." His mask dropped then. The smooth-talking husband turned into a sneering child. "Fine," he spat. "You think you can raise that kid without me? You'll be broke in a month. You're nothing without me." And Emma smiled. Cold, calm, beautifully terrifying. "I was nothing because of you." He left, slammed the door like a coward in retreat, and the house went silent. Emma stood still. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them in with the strength of a mother who just realized she'd been fighting the wrong battle. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know. I trusted him. So did I." Then she collapsed into my arms like she was 6 years old again. And I held her like I hadn't in decades. That night, she put Calvin to bed and made us tea. We sat on the porch in silence for nearly an hour. "I kept making excuses for him," she said finally, even when I felt it in my gut, that something was wrong. "Because you're kind," I said. "Because you loved him." She shook her head. "I feel like a fool." I reached for her hand. "You're not a fool. You're a survivor, like your mom." She smiled sadly. She'd have known from the beginning. I nodded. She would have known, but she also would have waited, like I did, because she believed in giving people the rope to either pull themselves up or hang themselves. The next morning, I took the recordings to Ray. We filed a report with the sheriff's department. I didn't want revenge. I wanted protection. For Emma. For Calvin. For any woman Bryce might prey on next. Within 48 hours, Bryce was arrested in a motel 2 counties over, hiding under a false name with a duffel bag of Emma's jewelry and a burner phone. The charges? Attempted murder, identity theft, fraud, possession of a controlled substance, violation of financial privacy. He tried to call Emma from jail. She didn't answer, but she did send back his wedding ring in a padded envelope with a sticky note that read, "You almost took my father. I won't let you take my peace." Weeks passed. The news trickled through the community. Neighbors stopped by, dropping off pies, flowers, and gasps. People said they had always had a bad feeling. I didn't care about gossip. I only cared that Emma was safe. That Calvin would grow up with truth instead of lies. One night, she came in my room holding a folder. Inside were legal papers, custody forms, home ownership transfers. "I want you to sign these," she said. "I want this house in your name again. I want you protected." I looked at her. "No." Her eyes widened. "But this house belongs to you now," I said. "You earned it back. I don't need walls to feel safe. I have you." She cried again, but this time it was healing. We remodeled the living room that summer, painted the kitchen a soft yellow. Calvin helped plant tomatoes in the backyard. Emma took evening classes online. And I started writing again. Short stories, sketches, letters to Maureen I never sent. I survived being poisoned. But more than that, I survived being erased by a man who thought age made me weak. He forgot one thing. Men like me, we don't just survive. We endure. And when we rise back up, we do it for the ones we love. Summer faded into fall, and the house finally started to feel like a home again. The scent of fresh paint still clung to the baseboards. New curtains danced in the breeze. Emma hung family pictures down the hallway. Real memories, not stage moments. Calvin ran around with a toy hammer, pretending to fix things like Grandpa. We laughed more, slept better. But just when I thought peace had finally returned, a stranger appeared at our front gate. It was a Sunday afternoon. Emma was at a grocery store. Calvin was napping. I was sanding the edges of a handmade toy chest for his birthday. That's when I saw her. Tall, slim, mid-30s, dark glasses, nervous eyes. She stood there, holding a small handbag like it might float away if she let go. I stepped onto the porch. "Can I help you, ma'am?" She looked up quickly. "You're Robert Callahan?" "Yes, ma'am." Her voice trembled. "I need to speak with you. It's about Bryce." I almost didn't let her in. but something in her voice, something broken, made me pause. I nodded toward the porch bench. "We'll talk out here." She sat down slowly, careful like someone used to being hurt. "My name is Lena Burke," she said. I was Bryce's fiancée. Until 3 years ago." I blinked. "Fiancé." She nodded. "We were engaged. In Arizona. I thought I was the only one. But then he ghosted me." Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled photo. It was Bryce, smiling, arm wrapped around her waist. Hair shorter, a different shirt, but no mistaking the smirk. He told me he was building a real estate startup, that we'd be rich. He had charm, Robert. So much charm. I didn't see the lies until they swallowed me. She showed me texts, old messages filled with love, then gaslighting, then sudden silence. "He disappeared after telling me his father-in-law died," she said bitterly. "Now I realize he meant you." I sat back, heart pounding. Bryce hadn't just tried to kill me. He'd been practicing, running cons for years, charming women, draining them, moving on. I took a deep breath. "How did you find me?" She hesitated. "Someone sent me a newspaper clipping about his arrest." I leaned forward. "Who?" Lena looked shaken. "I don't know." The envelope had no return address. Inside was just a printout. "He's not done hurting people. Go warn them." I stared at the trees beyond the porch. Was this Bryce's web unraveling? Or was someone trying to finish what he started? Lena stayed another hour. She told me about the other women she met online after joining a support group. Bryce had at least 3 aliases, 3 states, 3 women he left with ruined credit and broken hearts. And now, we were all collateral in his trail of destruction. I told Emma that night. She listened without blinking, holding Calvin in her lap. When I showed her the photo, she whispered, "That's our backyard. He brought her here." I nodded. "I think she deserves to testify." We called Ray, my private investigator friend, and connected Lena with the prosecution. She agreed. She wanted to finally speak the truth. But Bryce? Bryce did what cowards do. He pled out. The charges were stacked so high his lawyer begged for a deal. He admitted to the fraud, the financial abuse. The attempted murder was quietly buried in exchange for a guaranteed sentence of 14 years. He'll serve maybe 8. That burned me. But what burned worse? Emma never got to face him in court. We hosted a small gathering the night of the plea deal. Ray came. Lena came. Some neighbors. Friend from my church. We lit candles. Shared stories. And for the first time, Lena met Emma. 2 women. 2 scars. 1 truth. "He broke you too," Emma said softly. Lena nodded. "But he didn't end me." Emma smiled. "He didn't end me, either." They hugged. And I swear, in that moment, I saw Maureen in both of them. Weeks passed. Emma started therapy. I started volunteering at a veterans writing group. And Calvin? He started saying full sentences. One night, while I tucked him in, he looked at me and said, "Papa's safe now." I nearly broke. But peace is never permanent when you face death. Because just when we'd all begun to breathe again, another letter came. No return address. Typed. Clean. Crisp. Inside. "You think it's over? There's more you don't know. Watch your back, old man." I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked at Emma, and I knew Bryce may be locked away, but his secrets weren't. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter like a snake coiled in wait. Emma didn't see it yet. I stood there alone in the soft light of dawn, reading that message over and over again. "You think it's over? There's more you don't know. Watch your back, old man." Every word crawled down my spine like cold fingers. I'd faced death. I'd stared down my own murder attempt. But this was different. This was a warning. And whoever sent it knew something I didn't. Ray came over that afternoon. I didn't wait. I showed him the letter, and he immediately examined the envelope with gloved hands. "No fingerprints," he muttered. "No return address. Standard paper, cheap printer. Dropped it in your mailbox or hand-delivered." Emma was in the living room, folding Calvin's clothes. She hadn't asked about the envelope yet. I lowered my voice. Could it be from one of Bryce's women? Someone angry? Ray shook his head. Could be. Or it could be someone who knows more about Bryce than we do. He tucked the envelope into his briefcase. "Let me dig." That night, I sat in the study and pulled out a shoebox Maureen once kept locked. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were scraps of our life, photos, hospital bracelets, receipts from our first home. At the bottom, folded so tightly it was almost brittle, was a letter. An old one, from Bryce. Before they married, I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect. Maureen had written a note at the top. There's something about this boy I don't trust. Bryce's letter was to Emma, a declaration of love. But as I read it now, I saw the layers, the manipulation. Your father doesn't see who I am. He sees a threat, but I'm only trying to protect you from his control. Control? I'd never controlled Emma. Never once. But Bryce wanted her to believe I had. He wanted her to question her foundation so he could become it. I stared out the window, heart thudding. Maureen had seen it. She'd felt it in her bones. And I ignored her. Ray called 3 days later. You need to hear this in person. I met him at his office. He had a manila folder thick with printouts and a grim look on his face. Bryce wasn't born Bryce, he said, laying out the papers. His real name was Aaron Michael Denton. Changed it legally when he turned 22. What? Ray handed me a printout. It was a police report from Illinois. Aaron, Bryce, had been implicated in a case involving a local pastor's daughter. Older man, manipulated the girl. Bank accounts drained. She disappeared. Never solved. No arrest. No conviction. Just whispers. Bryce moved states. Changed his name. Started over. And Emma had no idea. I took the folder home and sat Emma down. I told her everything. Slowly. Gently. She sat stiff, holding Calvin in her lap. When I said the name Aaron Denton, her hands tightened around her son. Is he going to come back? She asked. No, I said. But someone might be trying to finish his work. Emma looked me dead in the eyes. Then we finish it first. We sent copies of the documents to the DA. The plea deal was already signed, but the judge agreed to reopen Bryce's background under sealed review. It wouldn't undo what happened, but it gave closure. More importantly, it meant that if he ever petitioned for parole early, his full history would be on record. Weeks passed. Then, just as we started breathing again, the doorbell rang. Emma opened it. It was Lena, Bryce's former fiancée, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a young woman, barely out of her teens, holding a baby. I think he's yours, Lena whispered to Emma. Emma's eyes widened, and just like that, the story wasn't over. It was just beginning again. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter like a snake coiled in wait. Emma didn't see it yet. I stood there alone in the soft light of dawn, reading that message over and over again. You think it's over? There's more you don't know. Watch your back, old man. Every word crawled down my spine like cold fingers. I'd face death. I'd stare down my own murder attempt. But this was different. This was a warning. And whoever sent it knew something I didn't. Ray came over that afternoon. I didn't wait. I showed him the letter, and he immediately examined the envelope with gloved hands. No fingerprints, he muttered. No return address. Standard paper, cheap printer. Dropped it in your mailbox or hand-delivered. Emma was in the living room, folding Calvin's clothes. She hadn't asked about the envelope yet. I lowered my voice. Could it be from one of Bryce's women? Someone angry? Ray shook his head. Could be. Or it could be someone who knows more about Bryce than we do. He tucked the envelope into his briefcase. Let me dig. That night, I sat in the study and pulled out a shoebox Maureen once kept locked. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were scraps of our life, photos, hospital bracelets, receipts from our first home. At the bottom, folded so tightly it was almost brittle, was a letter. An old one, from Bryce. Before they married, I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect. Maureen had written a note at the top. There's something about this boy I don't trust. Bryce's letter was to Emma, a declaration of love. But as I read it now, I saw the layers, the manipulation. Your father doesn't see who I am. He sees a threat, but I'm only trying to protect you from his control. Control? I'd never controlled Emma. Never once. But Bryce wanted her to believe I had. He wanted her to question her foundation so he could become it. I stared out the window, heart thudding. Maureen had seen it. She'd felt it in her bones. And I ignored her. Ray called 3 days later. You need to hear this in person. I met him at his office. He had a manila folder thick with printouts and a grim look on his face. "Bryce wasn't born Bryce," he said, laying out the papers. His real name was Aaron Michael Denton. Changed it legally when he turned 22. "What?" Ray handed me a printout. It was a police report from Illinois. Aaron, Bryce, had been implicated in a case involving a local pastor's daughter. Older man, manipulated the girl. Bank accounts drained. She disappeared. Never solved. No arrest. No conviction. Just whispers. Bryce moved states. Changed his name. Started over. And Emma had no idea. I took the folder home and sat Emma down. I told her everything. Slowly. Gently. She sat stiff, holding Calvin in her lap. When I said the name, Aaron Denton, her hands tightened around her son. "Is he going to come back?" she asked. "No," I said, "but someone might be trying to finish his work." Emma looked me dead in the eyes. "Then we finish it first." We sent copies of the documents to the DA. The plea deal was already signed, but the judge agreed to reopen Bryce's background under sealed review. It wouldn't undo what happened, but it gave closure. More importantly, it meant that if he ever petitioned for parole early, his full history would be on record. Weeks passed. Then, just as we started breathing again, the doorbell rang. Emma opened it. It was Lena, Bryce's former fiancée, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a young woman, barely out of her teens, holding a baby. "I think he's yours," Lena whispered to Emma. Emma's eyes widened, and just like that, the story wasn't over. It was just beginning again. To be continued. Chapter 6. Echoes from the past. The baby in the girl's arms looked just like Bryce. That sharp nose, hazel eyes, dimpled chin. Emma didn't move at first. She stood in the doorway, stunned, like someone had cracked her open with one blow. Calvin peeked out from behind her legs, gripping his blanket. I stepped forward and opened the door wider. "Come in," I said gently. Lena entered first, then the girl followed slowly. She was trembling. "My name's Ivy," she said, voice soft as tissue. I didn't know where else to go. We sat in the living room, the baby cooing in her lap. Emma sat across from her, silent, arms folded. I stood nearby, watching everything, mind racing. "How do you know Bryce?" I asked. "I met him 2 years ago," Ivy whispered. "Online. He said his name was Marcus. He told me he worked in finance, had a home in Raleigh. We met 3 times, and then he disappeared." "Why now?" Emma finally asked. Ivy looked up red-eyed. "I didn't know I was pregnant until after he ghosted me. I found out who he really was just a month ago. Someone in a support group sent me a news article about his arrest. Said he'd done this to other women. I clenched my fists. Even in prison, Bryce's shadow reached beyond our walls. "And the baby?" I asked. "His name is Liam. He's 15 months. Emma looked down at Calvin. They were half-brothers. We had a long discussion that night. Emma wanted to help Ivy, but didn't know how. She felt betrayed all over again, as if Bryce's crimes kept splitting her life into smaller, harder pieces. "I want to hate the baby," she said through tears. "But he didn't do anything wrong." "No, he didn't," I said. "He's as much a victim as we are." Ivy stayed for the weekend. She had nowhere else to go. Her family had disowned her for getting pregnant young, and Bryce, Marcus, had been her only support. We fed her, gave her the guest room. Liam shared a playpen with Calvin in the living room. And by Monday morning, the laughter of 2 children filled the house again. It was healing in a strange way. That week, Ray dug further into Bryce's aliases. There were 5, each connected to women, to wire transfers, to money stolen. He was a serial predator, using romance as a weapon. Ray passed the files to federal authorities. There was talk of a wider indictment. Even prison might not shield him forever. But we couldn't wait. Emma and I began paperwork to apply for full custody of Calvin, protect Ivy's rights, and set legal boundaries. We also drafted a restraining order, should Bryce ever be released. I contacted the press quietly. Bryce's story made a local headline. North Carolina man behind bars may be linked to multi-state romance fraud ring. Emma watched the segment once, then turned off the TV. She didn't need more noise. She needed peace. A month later, we had a small birthday party for Calvin. It was quiet, just me, Emma, Ivy, the kids, and Ray. We made cupcakes, sang songs, and when Calvin smashed frosting into his face, Liam squealed with laughter. Emma caught Ivy's eye and smiled. They weren't enemies. They were survivors. Sisters in tragedy, mothers in hope. And I stood back and watched it all, heart swelling. This wasn't the life I planned, but it was ours, and I'd protect it with everything I had. Because love, real love, doesn't quit when the storm comes. It digs in, it rebuilds, it rises, and so would we. You'd think after all we'd been through, peace would stick around longer. But it didn't. A month after Calvin's birthday, after cupcakes and paper crowns and a living room filled with laughter, the past came knocking, this time from behind bars. It started with a letter addressed to Emma. She didn't recognize the return address, but I did. The state penitentiary in Butner. Bryce. Emma didn't open it right away. She left it on the dining table for 2 days, like it might vanish if ignored. But letters like that don't vanish. They linger, whisper, infect a room like mold. On the third morning, she slid it across the table to me. You read it first. I opened it with steady hands, even though my chest was tight. The letter inside was neat, typed. Coward script. Emma, you can hate me all you want, but one day you'll need answers, and I'm the only one who can give them. There are things you don't know about your mother, your father, even yourself. I'm not done. Not until you hear me out. Think about Calvin. Think about what's coming. No signature, just a name printed in bold. Bryce Denton. Emma read it next. Her face didn't change until the line about Maureen, her mother. What does he mean? She asked, voice hollow. I don't know, I said. But even as I said it, memories stirred. Things I had buried. I went to the attic that night. The place where old truths lived, packed into cardboard boxes and moth-eaten trunks. One box in particular, Maureen's journals. She'd kept them for years. After she passed, I couldn't bring myself to read more than a few pages. Now I needed to. I sat up there until morning, flipping through her thoughts, her pain, her warnings. And there it was, an entry from the week Bryce proposed to Emma. He reminds me of someone I once knew. The way he smiles without sincerity. The way he watches. I won't say anything yet. I don't want to drive Emma away. But if he's anything like the man from my past, we're in trouble. The man from her past. I remembered, faintly, before me, Maureen had dated someone briefly. A smooth talker, controlling. She'd left him fast, but he haunted her. What if Bryce was connected to him? What if that darkness had circled back around? Ray looked into it, dug through public records. Turns out Maureen's old flame, Roger Denton, was Bryce's uncle. Same eyes, same smirk, same pattern. Control, isolate, devour. It was generational. And Bryce? He was the family's next weapon. Emma didn't cry when I told her. She nodded. Quiet. Solid. I want to visit him, she said. I paused. Are you sure? I need to look him in the eyes and tell him. He doesn't own any part of me. Not my past. Not my son. Not my future. Ray arranged the visit. Supervised. Tightly controlled. Emma wore a blue blouse Maureen had once loved. She took no jewelry, no bag. Just courage. I stayed in the waiting room with Calvin and Ivy. When she came back, she looked older. Not weaker. Wiser. What did he say? I asked. She took a deep breath. He tried to charm me. Said he was sorry. Said he was protecting me from you. I flinched. Me? Emma nodded, but I shut it down. Told him the only thing I regretted was not listening to you sooner. I smiled. That's my girl. She teared up, then said something I didn't expect. He mentioned Ivy. My stomach sank. Ow! He said she wasn't who she says she is. The seed was planted. Doubt. And that's how Bryce worked. Even locked away, he pulled strings. Ivy had been nothing but honest with us. Kind. Grateful. She worked part-time, helped Emma around the house, treated Liam and Calvin like brothers. But now he watched her differently, and it broke my heart. I pulled Ray aside. I need you to check Ivy's past. Quietly. He did. What he found was complicated. Ivy's real name was Charlotte Ivy Wynn. She'd changed it at 17 after a legal emancipation. Not because of crime, but because of abuse. Her father had been arrested for trafficking girls. Ivy had testified against him. She changed her name to escape that shadow. Started fresh. Alone. She met Bryce, Marcus, when she was vulnerable, searching for something good, and he preyed on it. When I told Emma the truth, she cried. I judged her, she whispered. I let him poison me again. We sat Ivy down, told her everything. She cried too, then hugged Emma like a sister. We're not broken, Ivy said. We're survivors. And I believed her. That week, we had family portraits taken. Me, Emma, Calvin, Ivy, Liam, all 5 of us. Not perfect, but real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Even with Bryce still whispering from behind bars. Because whispers can't win when truth shouts louder. And our truth, we were a family, not chosen by blood, but forged in fire. You'd think truth would set you free. But the thing about truth is, it often comes with a price. In the weeks following the prison visit, we walked on shaky ground. The air in the house was tense, but not from anger. From fear, from memories, from watching over our shoulders. Emma was quieter. Ivy held Liam closer. And I started locking the front gate again. Even though Bryce was behind bars, we all felt the chill of his reach. Then came the subpoena. It was early morning. A knock on the door. A man in a gray windbreaker with a badge clipped to his collar. Robert Callahan, that's me. You've been served. I opened the envelope slowly. Bryce was fighting his case. He'd filed an appeal, claiming mental distress, emotional instability, and manipulation by others. And I was being called to testify. Again, Ray got to work. He's trying to shift the narrative, he said, claiming he was a victim of trauma, not a predator. The system's soft on this kind of defense these days. Emma was furious. He tried to kill you, gaslight me, abandon a child, and now he wants pity. He's desperate, I said. Cornered animals bite. But what none of us expected was for Bryce's new lawyer to request visitation rights on his behalf. With Calvin, the judge denied it, quickly, but the fact that Bryce even tried, it lit a fire in all of us. Emma sat down that night and started writing a book. Not a novel, not a diary, a memoir. People need to know what this looks like, she said. What it feels like when someone poisons your life from the inside out. She wrote in the mornings before Calvin woke up. Ivy helped edit. I cooked breakfast, watched the boys, refilled coffee. It became our rhythm. And for the first time in a long time, Emma had something that was hers. Not as a daughter, not as a victim, as a survivor, as a writer, as a woman finding her voice again. Meanwhile, I began speaking at the local VFW hall, sharing my story. At first, just a handful of men came. Old-timers, some younger guys too. A few nods, a few stories swapped. But by the 3rd meeting, the room was packed. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been betrayed by family. Turns out a lot of grandfathers carry wounds they never talk about. We created something sacred, a place to speak, to mourn, to heal. Then one evening, Ivy came home with bruises, small on her wrist and neck. Liam's father's cousin, she whispered. He saw me at the store, said I ruined Bryce's life. Called me names, grabbed me. I stood up so fast my chair fell over. But Ivy held up a hand. I already called the police, filed a report. She shook as she spoke, but her chin was high. I won't be scared anymore. Emma hugged her. You're safe here. And I promised both of them, I'll protect this family with my last breath. 2 weeks later, the appeal hearing was scheduled. Ray coached me through my testimony. He told me the defense would try to paint me as an angry old man, bitter and vengeful. But I knew the truth. I didn't want revenge. I wanted protection. For Emma, for Ivy, for Calvin, for Liam, for all the people who never got to speak. The day of the hearing, I wore Maureen's favorite tie. Emma wore her blue blouse again. We walked into that courthouse, not as broken survivors, but as warriors. And when I took the stand, I told the story from the beginning. About Bryce's lies, about the poisoning, about Lena, about Ivy, about the letter in the mailbox that threatened my life, about the truth. Every detail, every scar, every ounce of pain we turned into power. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked shaken. When I stepped down, Emma took the stand. She read a chapter from her memoir, the one where she described the moment she realized her husband was trying to erase her father. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The appeal was denied. and a restraining order was permanently granted. Bryce wouldn't be seeing any of us again. Not from behind bars. Not ever. That night, we lit a fire in the backyard, burned the last letter Bryce had ever sent, watched the ashes float into the stars. Emma stood beside me. Ivy rocked Liam gently. Calvin clung to my leg, and I looked around and knew. We'd been tested, but we'd held together as a family. It's strange how peace creeps in, not with a bang, but like the first hint of spring after a brutal winter. No more letters, no more court dates, no more threats in the mailbox. Just mornings filled with Calvin's laughter and Liam's tiny footsteps padding down the hallway. For the first time in a long time, we started dreaming again. Emma's memoir found a publisher. A small press out of Asheville loved her voice. They called it raw, riveting, and necessary. The editor told her, "You've captured something most people are too afraid to admit. That survival is messy, but still beautiful." When she held the printed galley copy in her hands, she cried for 20 minutes straight. Then she laughed. "I wrote this," she whispered. "Me, the same girl who thought no one would ever listen." I kissed her on the forehead. They're listening now. Ivy got her GD. She started night classes in early childhood education. Said she wanted to help kids who grew up with shadows in their homes. "You're already doing that," I told her one night while drying dishes. "Yeah," she smiled, "but I want to do it with tools, not just love." I nodded. "Love's a hell of a tool, though." She chuckled. "That's true." She was blooming. From trauma, from shame, into someone powerful. And watching her made me feel young again. The boys grew fast. Liam started calling me Pop. Calvin followed. One morning, I was tying my boots when Calvin ran in, arms stretched. "Pop, can I help with the garden?" 5 years ago, I would have thought that moment impossible. Now it was everything. We built a greenhouse that spring. Emma's idea. Said she wanted a place where things grew no matter what was happening outside. We planted tomatoes, herbs, cucumbers. Calvin and Liam had their own tiny section filled with marigolds and sunflowers. Watching them kneel in the soil, hands dirty and eyes bright. It was church. Not the building kind, the sacred kind. Ray came by more often. He brought his new girlfriend, June. Sweet woman. Retired school principal. She and Ivy talked for hours. Emma said one night, "Ray deserves someone soft." I raised my glass. We all do. Summer brought heat, but not tension. We held a block party for the first time in years. Neighbors brought pies. Kids ran barefoot in sprinklers, and we set up a projector in the backyard to show old movies. Emma's book had just hit shelves. Someone brought a copy and asked her to sign it. She looked stunned. "Are you sure?" They smiled. It helped my sister leave her husband. That's worth a signature. Emma signed it with shaking hands. I caught her afterward, eyes glassy. "I never thought my pain could help anyone." I said, "That's how you know it's real healing." Then came the letter. Not from Bryce. From a woman named Delilah Monroe. She lived in Texas. Said she read Emma's book and recognized some of Bryce's manipulations. Turns out Bryce had used another name while in Houston, Kevin Slade. Delilah was his fiancée at one point. He ghosted her after draining $10,000. She never pressed charges. Too ashamed. But now, she wanted to speak. Emma called her. They talked for 2 hours. Cried. Laughed. Promised to stay in touch. Then Emma said, maybe I should start a support group. And she did. Online at first. Then local meetings at the library. It grew fast. Survivors. Mothers. Sisters. Daughters. Even a few sons. They called it Ashes to Light. And Emma became their lighthouse. One Saturday, Ivy took Liam to a museum downtown. Calvin was napping. Emma and I sat on the porch, sipping iced tea. She turned to me, eyes glowing with something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. You ever think about dating again? She asked. I blinked. Me? She smiled. Yes, you. You're still breathing, aren't you? I laughed. I think about Maureen too much. She wouldn't want you alone forever. I looked out at the yard, the greenhouse, the sunflowers swaying in the wind. I'm not alone. Emma reached over, held my hand. No, you're not. Later that evening, I pulled out Maureen's picture. She was smiling in it, wind in her hair, holding a fresh-picked peach. I kept us together, sweetheart, I whispered. Just like you asked. And in that moment, I swear I felt the breeze carry her laughter. Soft, free, like spring, like home. It had been 2 years since Bryce went to prison. The air smelled different now, not like fear, like lilacs, morning dew, and cinnamon pancakes on Sunday. Our home was no longer a fortress. It was a haven, and peace. It didn't knock. It stayed. Emma's support group, Ashes to Light, was holding its first national conference. Over 100 women were flying in from all across the country. There would be panels, healing circles, workshops, and Emma was the keynote speaker. I watched her practice the speech in our living room, hands trembling, voice strong. "You think surviving is enough," she said. "But what if thriving is our quiet revenge?" I clapped when she finished. "You're not just surviving," I told her. "You're leading." Ivy graduated that spring with honors. She wore a white stole and held Liam tight as she walked across the stage. "I did it for him," she told me. "No," I smiled. "You did it for both of you." She was offered a job at a center for abused children. And just like that, her past became someone else's future. Better, softer, safer. Calvin and Liam were inseparable. Two peas in a dirt-covered pod. They built tree houses, collected rocks, and hosted imaginary pirate battles in the backyard. One day, Calvin asked, "Pop, was my dad ever a pirate?" I paused. "No, son," I said. "He tried to steal treasure, but he never learned how to protect it." Calvin blinked. "You protect treasure?" I smiled. "Always." He hugged me around the waist. "You're the best pirate ever." Ray and June got married in our garden. Simple, honest. Emma officiated. Calvin was the ring bearer. Ivy caught the bouquet. Liam danced with Emma under the fairy lights. There was laughter, peach cobbler, and old jazz. And when Ray gave his speech, he raised his glass toward me. "To Robert," he said, "for showing us that justice isn't just about courtrooms. It's about coming home, about choosing love again." I was too choked up to respond, but in my heart I whispered, "Thank you." In August, we received word that Bryce had died. Stroke. Infirmary. No visitors. No note. No apologies. Just silence. Emma sat with the news for a while. Then she opened her journal, wrote one sentence, and closed it. Good men don't leave behind echoes of fear. She didn't cry. Neither did I. The next morning, she took Calvin to the lake. They released a paper lantern. Not for him, she told the boy. For us. For what we let go of. And the lantern rose. Up and up. Until it became a star in the morning sky. Fall came quickly. The greenhouse burst with color. I began teaching gardening workshops at the community center. Mostly grandpas like me. Some kids, too. We called it Root and Rise. The name came from Ivy. She said it's what we all did. Put our pain in the dirt. Grew something better. Emma's second book released that November. A collection of stories from Ashes to Light members. Raw, unfiltered, brave. It hit the New York Times bestseller list. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. She went on a small book tour. Ivy joined. I stayed home with the boys. One night, they FaceTimed from a little bookstore in Michigan. Calvin waved. Pop, Mommy's famous. I chuckled. She's always been famous to me. Christmas came. The first one that didn't feel haunted. We made ornaments from seashells and string. Read stories by the fire. Played jazz records Maureen once loved. Emma put her mother's photo on the mantle. Thank you, she whispered. And I knew she didn't mean just for giving her life. She meant for warning her, for trusting her, for leaving a light. New Year's Eve, we sat around the fire pit. Champagne for the grown-ups, sparkling juice for the kids. When the clock struck midnight, Emma raised her glass. To the past, we forgive you. To the future, we welcome you. And to the present, we finally live in you. And just like that, the old wound closed. Not erased, but healed, stitched by time, by love, by every small, stubborn act of staying. This is where I leave you, not with vengeance, but with roots, and with the truth that sometimes the greatest revenge is peace.